Welcome to West Coast Focus, sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County. I'm your host, Steve Zmak, and today's show is all about abstract photography.
What is abstract photography? The answers seem to vary from artist to artist. I gave a talk a couple weeks ago at the Padre Trails Camera Club on the subject and posed these questions on several different images. Is it abstract? Is it contemplative? Is it surreal? The room of photographers was rarely in consensus. My own definition is even a little vague and abstract. Literal photography is about portraying memories, and abstract photography is about portraying fantasies. I'm eager to hear what today's panel of West Coast photographers, all of whom are recognized for their abstract work, have to say. Our first guest was born in Syracuse, New York in 1949, then moved to California where he began piano lessons at age 4 with intentions of becoming a concert pianist. He entered college as a music major in 1968 but soon turned to the study of two-dimensional design, and that led to a career in fine art photography in 1970. He studied with Ansel Adams, Win Bullock, Steve Crouch, and Al Weber. He has remained faithful to his classical photographic roots while progressively transitioning towards a more contemporary approach to the medium. Over the past 43 years, his photographs have been featured in more than 100 individual exhibitions in museums and galleries throughout the world. The overall body of his work represents a remarkably diverse approach that includes traditional landscapes, studies of pop art, botanical still life, and urban architecture. His most recent series features a form of abstract digital collage in which photography is combined with freehand sketching and drawing. He works in both black and white and color, and his photographs have been the subject of 3 award-winning monographs: Orchestrating Icons, Botanical Dances, and Photosynthesis. And he has just completed a brand new comprehensive online gallery and website. He has taught photography for a variety of institutions, including the University of California, Friends of Photography, and Ansel Adams Gallery. In 1999, he was the recipient of the Artist of the Year Award presented by the Center for Photographic Art in Carmel, California. He's one of the pillars of the West Coast tradition. It's an honor to have Huntington Witherall on the show. Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Our next guest was born in Berlin, Germany. His father was a well-known writer, his mother a photographer, his brother a sculptor, and his sister a pianist. And he studied graphic design and typography at the Berlin Academy of the Arts. After finishing his education, he and his wife visited the U.S. on their honeymoon in 1963. With a green card in hand, he settled in San Diego via New York and began a distinguished career in graphic design. He bought his first 35mm camera in 1972, and in 1984, he moved his design business to San Francisco and then Pacific Grove in 1992. It was there that he got involved with the Center for Photographic Art and served on the board for a year, then the advisory board for a decade. During that period, he designed a number of books for CPA and scores of abstraction for Oliver Gagliani. And this started his fascination with macro photography. Inspired by Gagliani, he shot more than 400 close-ups of rusted graffiti-covered freight trains for the portfolio Metamorphosis. In 2007, he had a solo exhibition of 30 large images from that portfolio at the Carl Cherry Center for the Arts in Carmel. In 2010, the Fresno Art Museum featured his Headlights Up Close portfolio in a 3-month exhibition, followed by a solo show at the Marjorie Evans Gallery in Carmel. His work is represented in collections throughout the U.S. and Europe, most notably 41 large botanical images at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula. We have Bert Eilenfeld in the studio today. Welcome, Bert.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our next guest was born in Otaru, Japan in 1950 and grew up across the U.S. from Hawaii to New Hampshire, then returned to Japan until his father retired from the military. Throughout his childhood, he showed a serious inclination to the arts that began to materialize during his own military service. While stationed in Guam, he learned underwater photography while pursuing scuba diving. After his tour, he came back to the Monterey Peninsula to attend college and begin a career in lithography. A Jerry Ullsman exhibit in Monterey inspired and propelled him into fine art black and white photography, and 40 years later, he has acquired a reputation for his exquisite platinum palladium prints, in addition to his traditional black and white work. His work has appeared in View Camera, Photo Vision, Camera and Darkroom, Black and White, Lens Work, and Focus magazines. He has published 3 books along with similar catalogs. His first portfolio, 10 Photographs, was published in 1990, and his second portfolio, Platinum Palladium, was published in 2002. He's currently working on large split-toned black and white and color photographs of frozen botanicals, and working on his third portfolio, P Square, a selection of platinum prints. His work can be found in private and public collections worldwide, including the Monterey Museum of Art, Getty in Los Angeles, and Center for Creative Photography in Tucson. We featured his photography on the underwater episode of West Coast Focus in 2016, but we have him live and in 3D today. Hi, Rayuji. It's great to have you here.
Hi. Good to be here. Thank you.
So, Hunter,
Yes.
how do you define abstract photography?
Well, I think this, for me, the simplest way to define abstract photography would be to say if you recognize what the photograph is portraying, it's not abstract. If you don't recognize it, or if it looks like something other than what it appears to be, I would say that's abstract.
So is the definition that black and white, or is there some spectrum
No.
kind of in between?
Yeah, no, it's not at all black and white, and it's a difficult question because the two are not mutually exclusive. They can cross one another. So you can get a variety of opinions from a variety of viewers about whether a photograph actually is abstract or not. So it's not really a well-defined differentiation.
Bert, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think most people that look at my work, if they are familiar with a portfolio, they know, okay, it's tidal metamorphosis, studies on rust and industrial waste, so to say, which is very beautiful. But they can't quite pinpoint what attracts them to it. And so abstraction, in my mind, it's very realistic. It's out there, and you just have to see it. And most people seem to be blind. They go by something that I photograph. And to me, it's not abstract at all. It's realistic. But people look at it and say, okay, I like it, and I don't know why, but it's so beautiful. How did you do it? I don't want to hear how did you do it. So, yeah, it can be quite confusing to some people why I would be on my knees photographing rust. But that's what I like to do because there is a magic to it. And I discover things through my little macro camera.
Rayuji, how do you define it?
Abstract? Well, most of my work I don't think is abstract. Okay. My most recent work might be considered that. I've been
That's the botanicals in
no,
ice?
No, I've been doing graffiti, but picking out solid colors, making very large prints. You know, they're red, they're yellow. Okay, and I guess you could call that non-objective. But like my black and white work, though, early on, I think some of them might be considered abstract. Although, say that there's a photograph of a wharf pier. Okay, it's no longer really literal because I've reduced the pilings to jet black, and the water reflections are all white. So yeah, it's a literal photograph, but there's something more underlying that, right? And or a piece of broken glass. You know, somebody says, well, that's just broken glass, but no, there's a bird here and a bird there. You know, that's what I'm seeing. Now I don't know if someone else is seeing that, but I think it's it's sort of taking literal and just pushing it a little bit farther off the edge so that sand dune becomes, yes, it's a sand dune, but those blacks are not there. You know, they were put in there, you know, to create a form other than what was actually seen.
Well, what about it's a sand dune, but I've never seen a sand dune look like that before,
right?
Presented in that way before. Does that push into abstract?
I think so. I think it pushes it toward abstract, but it's still recognizable, and I think that that's part of photography too. That it's hard unless you zoom in that macro mode, you know, and just sort of eliminate everything that could make it recognizable. Then it's not, you know, it's a pure abstract. I guess you'd call it pure abstract, you know.
What do you think? Do you think I throw this out to all of you? Pure abstract, does it just simply rely on a composition and aesthetic, and really what it is literally is completely removed altogether?
Well, for me, I always have been interested in and paid attention to what Alfred Stieglitz called the equivalent. And Minor White described it very succinctly when he said he wanted to photograph things for what they are and for what else they are. And a lot of times when you're out looking at the world, you will look at something and you will say to yourself, gee, that looks like a building, but it also looks like, you know, whatever it is else beyond that. That really attracts me in photography, and I try to look for those kinds of situations where things are what they are, but also something completely different than what they are. And that can be done through just visual representation of what it is. It can be done through using objects as metaphors or similes for other kinds of thoughts. So that's why I think potentially an objective representational photograph can be abstract at the same time that it's representational.
And will an abstract image, can it convey the same message to all viewers, or is every viewer going to see an abstract image uniquely?
I would say no, it's never going to. You're never going to get the same reaction out of all your audience, no matter
I
what
agree
you
with
do.
that. You're not going to.
Yeah. You cannot guarantee what the reaction of the audience will be. You can try to channel them into seeing things a certain way, but you know, getting a sort of a pat response from your audience is going to be pretty difficult.
Now, Bert, with your metamorphosis portfolio, now all the viewers go in knowing that they're looking at corroded, rusted metal. So within the context of a whole portfolio, you're sort of, you know, revealing what the subject really is. So now how do you think your viewers can overcome what knowing it is and then still be mesmerized by how you've presented it?
Well, I make a habit of listening to people and talking to people, and I remember at the Cherry Center with one of the big lead shots, people stood around and the comments went, oh, it's a bullfight. No, it's a volcano that's exploding. And then there was this very interesting person. He said, I'm a psychiatrist, and these are the layers of your inner self and how you get to the real you. And he explained at length all these different interpretations of what, and I said, no, it's rust. It's rust and peeling paint and a little bit left of graffiti on an old train. So I would say that any viewer is entitled to his interpretation, and I love it. I see it with my own images that I have in my studio and at home. I discover always something new that I hadn't seen before. The longevity of those pieces astounds me sometimes. And, you know, if I take my wife who loves my work and she's never getting tired and say, can't you take something? Can't you move it? Can't you put something else there? It seems like with Metamorphosis, I hit the winner.
Now, how did that subject draw your attention, and why does it hold your attention?
My own?
Yeah, personally as an artist. Why is that your go-to?
Because I'm so good. I love my own work. You know, I'm obsessed with it. And it's just when I look what nature, if I call rust nature, it's not really nature, but it's the result of blah, blah, blah. It just fascinates me. All the forms, all the things that a painter would have to invent, and there I get it in a split second, and I have a beautiful image. And you know, I like singular shots. I do other things, but Metamorphoses are all individual shots, not any larger than a business card size, macro. And what happens really, the effect then, if it's blown up to 3 feet, then the details really come out, even with this little baby here. Okay, 10.5 megapixels that Hunter showed me how to work with giving me instructions of how to enlarge it, giving me curves and giving me a pat on the back saying, keep going.
Good.
Rayuji, what are
Well,
you, what kind of subjects do you chase?
I have a story for you.
Good.
Okay. And this was quite a while ago. My son might have been about 10 years old. And we went out to Carmel Valley to visit with Brett. And Brett was working on his Hawaii book, and he was going through all these images, right? Had a big stack of them. So we go in, we sit down for a minute, and then we go take a look at photographs. And my son's there, and Brett puts down a photograph, and it's the leaves. He goes, "What kind of plant is that?" And Brett's here being really patient. He goes, "Well, I don't really care about the plant, I'm just looking at the form and the light."
Right.
And then he brings another one down. I said, "What kind of plant is that?" And this goes on through the whole, the whole stack of prints here. So, and it kind of says something about some people will just see the plant, right? And they don't see the form. They don't really recognize what he's trying to do here, And anyway, Brett was being a real gentleman that day, humoring my son, So that was fun.
I think that points to a really interesting aspect of photography, and that is the sort of common notion that everybody thinks that photographs are real. You look at a photograph and they're believable. It's the reality of what was before the camera. And the fact of the matter is that they are not real. They're a huge manipulation and a huge departure from reality. And most people, the masses, shall we say, don't really understand that. And so when they look at a photograph, they do expect to recognize what it is that's the picture has been taken of. And if they don't, it can be pretty challenging for them and put them off in some respects.
I like to have the viewers. Like if I can keep their wheels turning longer, then I think that the photo is doing its purpose and engaging them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's time to actually see some photography from our guests. So for your viewing pleasure, we have slideshows of Huntington Witherall and Bert Eilenfeld's photography to the guitar stylings of Pacific Grove's own Bill Specht. Stick around. We'll see you back here to continue the discussion in a few minutes. West Coast Focus is sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County through a cultural grant to fund all of our 2018 productions. And West Coast Focus has an extra special connection to the Arts Council because Ansel Adams in 1982 led dedicated civic, arts, and business leaders to create this agency as part of a nationwide movement powered by the National Endowment for the Arts. The mission of the Arts Council for Monterey County is to improve the quality of life for everyone in our region through the arts. Bert, where do you draw your inspiration from? What set you on the abstract path initially, and what continues to inspire you today?
I can answer that rather quickly because in 2006, I designed Oliver Gagliani's book, Scores of Abstraction.
Go ahead and hold that up.
In 2006.
Hold that up.
Okay, this is what it looks like. The inside is a composite of 9 years of work from Gagliani. He went to Yosemite for 2 weeks for 9 years and photographed bits and pieces of worn out tented areas in Curry Village. He went there and was so obsessed with photographing these, and they are absolute marvels of minimalism. They have things that I absolutely adored. And what happened is that his work influenced me so much that I went out and discovered a freight train. And that day I shot 400 images of rust and all in color. And it just blew me away. In addition, I had just inherited or bought from Rod Dresser a big printer. And I started cranking out the big prints because I love big work. So other than that, I have never tried to emulate any photographer or artist. I wanted to find my own way. I'm totally self-taught. I don't know much about all the things that Hunter knows, technically, or you. But to me, it's my eyes. And I think God blessed me with a couple of very sensitive eyes that find things other people just don't see. So the influences in general come from my background. I grew up in a family that was surrounded by art and music, and it's just, I soaked it up. And it's now reflected in what I'm doing. So the only thing that I can say, in addition to influences, I got great help from Hunter, who took me in like a little student and taught me some of the basics. And I'm forever grateful because I still use your curves. And I still love what you have always encouraged me to do more.
Thank you.
So he's my mentor.
Excellent. Rayuji, where do you draw inspiration?
Now? Not from any particular person now. I mean, early on, local photographers, Wynn and Brett, and you know, and I also liked the work of like Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskin. But and it was important for me at that time, you know, because it's hard to find your own style, your own voice. And photography is such a, well, it was such a complicated and technical medium 40 years ago. I mean, with chemistry and film, you know, and you hear everyone say, well, yeah, it took me 20 years to learn how to use film, you know, so, and it is like that. So I spent a lot of time, you know, doing long exposures like when at the beach, and until finally I go, oh, wow, I finally got a photograph that I like, you know, and I'm finally learning something. And then the next one comes a little easier, and the next one comes a little easier. So, you know, that's probably where my you know, influences came from. Although subliminally, you know, I used to go to all the photo shows, you know, Photo LA, Photo San Francisco, and it's great to see lots of new work and lots of different artists, and I'm sure I'm absorbing some of that, right, and I'm remembering some of it. So.
That's what I like. When I go to an image makers meeting once a month and I see 15 photographers present work that is all over the spectrum, I just walk out of there just, wow, I want to try this, I want to try that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, but I don't know where it comes from. It's just like, I have an idea and I go, you know, it's like, what if? You know, what if I do this? You know?
What if?
But where'd that come from? I have no idea. You know, so, You know, why did I start freezing things in blocks of ice? You know, I'm not really sure.
You just woke up one day and let's do
yeah,
this.
well, what if I do this? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Experimentation is
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Hunter, what put you on the abstract path? And did you start out more literal and then switch over?
Well, I just started out photographing things that attracted my attention, and I wasn't even at the time aware whether they were abstract or representational. I could go back and look at my very first photograph, and I think it could be considered both, either. My influences, having studied with Ansel and Steve Crouch, now Weber and Win Bullock, you know, in the early part of my career, they were, of course, influences in the beginning. And since then, I gained a lot of inspiration as I was trained in music. I gained a lot of inspiration from musicians. There are a couple in particular. A jazz pianist by the name of Bill Charlap is a person whom I get a lot of ongoing inspiration from. Art Tatum, Oscar Peterson, people like that. But inspiration can come from just about anywhere. So it's hard to really, you know, state this is where it came from.
What's your preference, black and white or color?
Well, at this point, I don't really have a preference. I do find that it is in some ways easier to create an abstract photograph using black and white. And I think that's because when you work in black and white, you take away yet one more element of the realism of the image itself. And so it helps to make it more abstract. But certainly, you know, you can look at Bert's rust images. They are in wild color, and they work. So there's no set rules.
Yeah. Now, Bert, have you done any black and white work?
I
Or
have
you all color?
several black and white portfolios, but you know, I don't feel experienced enough to produce good prints. But the ideas are there. And yeah, I have done quite a number, and I didn't bring any because they are, I thought we would talk about color in my case. But I come back to Hunter. He once looked at some of my images from the other portfolio, Headlights Up Close, and he said, Bert, you really should try these in black and white, because I think just what you said, it will take away a level and it will really focus on just forms. And I tried a few, and then I'm sorry to tell you that I couldn't continue because I couldn't get anything on my Epson printer on black and white that was really grabbing me. So, but I promised myself that eventually, when I'm a little better at Photoshop and printing, I will take your advice. I should have taken it earlier. Because it really, the abstraction is so much stronger in black and white. There's no distraction. Color can be a distraction.
Ryuji, your preference? You go back and forth?
I go back and forth. Yeah.
Is it because you change your preference, or you really have none?
No. I go back and forth. I mean, I like black and white, and I don't do a lot of silver gelatin anymore, but I do a lot of platinum printing, and that can become abstract also. But you know, I was an offset printer for over 40 years, so it's not like I'm new to color. You know, I've been adjusting for color process for years and years. You know, it's like, oh yeah, too much magenta, too much yellow, you know, that kind of thing. And that's why I was asking Bert about whether he adjusts color in his photographs or not, because I know that it changes the mood of the photograph. You know, because I recently did. I was working on one of my ice forms, a new one of some sweet peas this week, and it once it froze, it was so purple, and I go, it doesn't feel good, you know. So I got rid of a lot of that magenta, and brought in a little bit of more red and more yellow into it. And okay, now I like it. You know, it looks good. You know, it feels good. So, but you know, I really do like both. I really do like both.
So do I. It depends on, you know, whatever subject matter I'm approaching, of whether, wow, that looks really cool in black and white, or no, I mean, this is all about color. And so I got to do it that way. Okay, so now Roman Laurence had an exhibit earlier this year at the Center for Photographic Art, and he was nice enough to grant Roger Gary Smith and myself an interview with him in the CPA gallery. And we're just going to show a preview of that today, but you can see the entire interview on a special episode of West Coast Focus that's going to be airing throughout the month of August at our regular times on Thursdays and Fridays. And that special is also going to be a compilation of the interviews we've done of other photographers in their studios and favorite locations, such as Richard Garrett, Gina and Kim Weston, Brett Thomas, and Kira Correa Corser. But for now, here's a preview of Roman Laurence's interview.
My early influence in photography was Roman Wiśniak, which was a Polish-Jewish photographer who photographed in ghetto in Warsaw, and Polish photographer Buchak, who most of it was architectural photographer. But when I come to United States, Ansel, Brad Weston, Edward Weston, and some of the Brad, I really start enjoying his kind of simple subject, abstract subject, which was very missing with Ansel work. It was very only few. I love Ansel work too, and Edward. But Brad got this idea of I don't know was it conscious or unconscious, but then when I spent some time on the wetland and weather and clouds never cooperated, I was looking for some quiet, simple subject. And I still remember that Brad did a couple Thule shots, very abstract. I didn't know what it was even, you know. So maybe conscious or unconscious, I start in my kind of time, downtime, start photographing Thule everywhere I go, every country, for like 20 years. And most of them, I never release it. I released this one and actually sold like all 200 edition very quickly. And I was like, whoa, people appreciate whatever I appreciate, you know? So I started releasing all these very abstract images and then doing that in China, Poland, Italy, everywhere I go. And they almost could be anywhere, but it's something to do and sometimes concentrate and slow down my approach to photography. Sometimes I know, and sometimes I'm surprised, and sometimes I take even 10 years before I figure out how to print the print. So it seems like a simple thing, but it is not. Your personal vision and approach to printing, it's so simple, but in other cases, it's so difficult to figure out how to do that. And sometimes depends on my feeling, how I feel. If I am, happy, exciting, prints come different. When I am a little bit depressed or different mood, they come different too. So I usually, from beginning when there was that school that every print should look the same, there was like, I never paid attention. Every my prints is different, even today. They never come the same. And that was before digital era. And I was always right, that's what it is. You don't want to produce the same print. And I never write down number or note how to print. I always go fresh to that approach. That's only I know, and I think so I know well. And for me, I don't have nothing against digital photography. And I love shoot with iPhone, and I actually a year ago purchased digital camera, and sometimes occasionally I take it for fun. But for me, the silver print has some incredible quality, which can be matched even today with such advanced technology in digital to the silver print. I think so, like a living thing, the silver print is something magical about it. So that's all I know, and I stick with it. I have respect for, churches, synagogue, you know, a million people pray. They have a power, but the most free and exciting and inspire is being nature. Yeah. And I try to all the time, wherever I can. And the camera is a great excuse to be there for endless hours. You know. So yeah, for me, escape from human chaos, noise, wetland, and riparian woodland is the perfect place to be.
You can see Roman's entire interview on West Coast Focus at our regular viewing times again, Thursday and Friday throughout the month of August, along with compilations of our past interviews. And if you visit Roman's website, you can see so much of his great work. And he's also coming out with a new book called Traces, and you can check it all out there. And it also comes with a limited edition print. A book, limited edition book, and it comes with a limited edition print. And thanks to Roger Gary Smith for his videography, and a huge thank you to the Center for Photographic Art for allowing us to bring our cameras into their gallery. So, Hunter, do you think artists, for better or worse, have a constant pattern that we can see in their abstract work through an entire career? Or do you think you can actually like break your mold and reinvent yourself?
Well, I would hope that one could reinvent themselves. That's what I try to do with my own work through the series that I do. But I think there is a thread that runs through each photographer's work that can be recognizable. It's not necessarily a pattern, but I could speak in my own case. I deal with subject matter and space and line and form in a particular way when I frame it up for a photograph. I'm very conscious of you know, how elements in the frame play off of the edges and the corners of the frame itself. So if you've seen enough of my work, you'll realize, you know, I don't do portraiture, but if I did portraiture, I would probably not cut somebody's hand off in the middle of the photograph, because that's just not the way that I relate to composition. I had training in two-dimensional design, which is basically the study of line and form and space within a prescribed framework in 2 dimensions. And it was very helpful in allowing me to learn how to organize objects and space within a frame for photography. It was a great compositional exercise to do that. And I think my photographs, all of them, regardless of the subject matter, tend to play into that. And I think that the abstract photographs that I do, which to the uninitiated viewer might look very chaotic, are very organized in terms of the space. And so that's why I say I don't think there's a set pattern that makes things abstract or that makes an entire portfolio recognizable. But there are ways in which each photographer personally approaches their composition and their technique, as it were, that can distinguish them from others. One would never confuse an Aaron Siskind photograph from a Brett Weston photograph because they are both so recognizable, but they're both abstract.
So do you think, like with Brett Weston, the abstracts at the beginning of his career versus the abstracts towards the end of his career, could we draw, if we only saw one of each, would we be able to connect and say, oh, that's Brett Weston?
Well, no, I think you need to see a lot of an individual artist's work before you're going to be able to see the thread that runs through it all. You can't. It's kind of like when you enter a juried exhibition and you're allowed 3 images. Well, the juror's never going to get an idea of what the overall body of your work is through 3 images. It's just not possible. So.
Bert, what do you think?
Well, I think my signature is macro. And I think that within a series, I get so obsessed in doing one kind of series. And within those, let's say, 20, 50, 100 images, you see a thread, absolutely, the way I see things. But from portfolio to portfolio, I think it differs because simply of the images. I can't say, well, this looks like a bird Ehrenfeld, but maybe it isn't. You know, some like in our image maker club now, some people are coming up with rust, and it's kind of funny because I remember when I first got my first awards at Black and White magazine and Color magazine on metamorphosis. It started out a revolution out there. All of a sudden, I see rust photography showing up in magazines and awards, and so I'm kind of proud that I inspired other people to do the same. But I still think that my images look different from what we saw at the image makers. So, but I would say within a given portfolio, yes, there's definitely the bird feeling there.
Definitely, yeah. Ryuji, do we see some commonality between your underwater work and your studio frozen botanicals?
Oh, maybe a little bit, but you know, I think that subconsciously or whatever, you know, when I'm working on a photograph, it either makes sense or it doesn't make sense, you know, and there has to be something underlying all that. You know, I'll flip an image around, you know, horizontally, whatever. Oh, yeah, it looks better that way.
Right.
But there has to be something there that, because if I don't like it and I've tried everything I can, then, you know, of course, it either gets deleted or if it's a print, it gets thrown in the trash, you know. So there has to be, there must be something there.
Okay, well, it's time to see some more photography, this time from Ryuji and myself. Of course, the original music of Bill Specht. We'll see you back here in a few minutes to continue the discussion. Welcome back to our discussion on abstract photography, sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County. Ryuji, how do you interpret the West Coast tradition, and how are you a part of it?
Well, I interpret it as being sort of large format photography work, generally black and white, you know, the landscape, tons of detail in the print and that sort of thing. But and I still do that. I still like it, and I still like the big camera. Although now I'm working in platinum, so it's changed a little bit. A lot of materials are not available, so it's become kind of a hybrid. I still have film, I scan it now, and now we make digital negatives for platinum printing. Okay.
Are you working on those negatives and post-production effects before printing them?
I am. I am, and it really helps. It makes a huge difference, and my exposures are very consistent, you know, in the final print. So.
What size film are you using?
For capture, 4x5 and 2 1/4. And my final prints are, you know, 5.5, 5.5. I have a series I call P squares, you know, platinum square prints. And I have the 4x5 taped off actually in a square, so I'm viewing a square.
Bert, West Coast tradition, where are you with
Well,
that?
before 2006, when all this happened with Gagliani and my desire to do similar things, not the same, I did a lot of photography with kelp. And since I live near the beach, I walked it every day and shot some stuff. And the result was I had open studio, and Amy Essig called me from Chomp and said, "Bert, I'm so sorry I can't come, but let's make an appointment." She said, "I need some new art for the new wing we're building." And so she came into my studio and she said, "I have to look at nature, and it has to be local nature." So we pulled out everything. My studio was littered on the floor, on the table, everywhere were prints. And she said, "Okay, now let's weed out the ones that I really want." And she picked, to my great joy, 28 images. And she said, "I need them all to be 20 by 30 with extra room for framing, etc." And she said, "We have a margin of 3 months. Can you do that?" And I had just gotten that new printer from Rod Dresser. And I said, "No, I can't do that." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you'll have them in 3 days." And she loved it, and they're now part of the permanent collection there. And kelp, like anything on the West Coast, is part of the Monterey Peninsula, so I think that's where my connection is, in addition to other shots that I took from rocks and formations and things. But I still consider them more or less not my prime target, you know. If we consider rust also being part of that area, then, okay, I'm part of it.
Hunter.
Well, I think for me, the West Coast tradition is more of an approach to photography than it is a specific location. It just happened to happen on the West Coast, started by Ansel Adams and a number of his colleagues. And I think it was a reaction to the way in which photographs had been made prior to that time, where there was a lot of out of focus and kind of fuzzy, more painterly types of photographs. The idea of using the camera to get very sharp, very delineated, and with lots of accutants and all that kind of stuff, photographs, that was really the basis of the West Coast tradition. And for myself, having studied with some of those people, of course, that's where I fit into that tradition. And like Ryuji, I continue to do landscape photography in the West Coast tradition to this day. It has really been a kind of a foundation for me.
What would you say is the proudest moment in your career?
Probably, I would say the moment that I actually came to the realization that being an artist and being a photographer is about the process of being an artist and being a photographer, and not about the photographs that you make. And so at the moment I realized that and really came to, came to understanding of that, it was a very illuminating and moment of pride for me, because I finally realized, oh, this is what you're actually trying to do. Stop worrying so much about what the photographs look like. Be into the process.
Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. It's a journey. It's the destination is not the focus. The journey itself is the focus.
How long did it take you to come to that realization?
Oh, 10 to 15 years
Okay.
at least.
Yeah. Bert, proudest moment of your career?
My proudest moment. I think for me, as an immigrant, so to say, to be recognized as an artist more than like a photographer, because I consider myself a California artist. That moment of having my first one-man show at the Cherry Center was with my daughters there, and a proud moment, okay? That my name is up there, the images. And every subsequent show I had that same feeling, and especially if a show lasts longer than a month or 3 weeks in a gallery. For instance, I had a show at the Del Monte Center at La Grill for 1 year. People didn't get tired of it. I now have for 2 years in a row the same show at Doctors on Duty on Lighthouse Avenue in Monterey. And I had at the Universal Church von Carmel. So the moment I am involved in a show, I'm so proud of myself that I'm happy.
Ryuji?
I don't know.
Any landmark moments?
There's lots of moments like that. You know, and they kind of compile on each other. I mean, for the first time I produce a print that's mine. You know, and then the next one, it's like, wow, and people actually like them. You know, this is cool. You know. And because obviously, I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't get started thinking that I was going to make money at this. You know, it was just photography, and I just loved it. You know, so and maybe my first big show. You know, that's a good moment. Or when I come up with something that, wow, you mean nobody else is doing this? You know, just me? Yeah, that's cool too. You know, so yeah, there's a lot of proud moments in there. You know. Like, oh yeah, the Center for Creative Photography wants my portfolio. Yeah, cool. You know,
that's a big moment. So, what do you have coming up now?
Now, well, I have some work hanging up now. Some of my new underwater work at the Weston Gallery, and then I just got an invitation from the center for a show out in Santa Cruz. So that was just today. So that's something new. And,
yeah, that's great.
That's new. Yeah.
Bert, what do you got coming up?
I'm working on a book idea. I was at Easter Island and shot all the moais, and I figured, my God, there must have been 60 million photographs taken a day there from Japanese tour groups and everyone else, and we had only a day time there, and I had to work with the light conditions that there were. But anyhow, I got a lot of good black and white shots, black and white,
Good.
Of those moai. And I figured, what can I do that's different? So I had the idea that the spirits meet with the moai and set them free to explore our modern world. They all of a sudden, they can move, they can fly, they can swim, they can come to San Francisco and be up on the bridge, but not in a touristy way. But really, I wanted to preserve their heritage, their so
that's great. So we got a new book coming out from you, Hunter. What do you got coming up?
Well, like Ryuji, I got invited to the same show, so we're going to have a show together up in Santa Cruz, I think in November. I have, since January, been working on my new website, and that's really very time-consuming, and I continue to tinker with it. And also, I continue to do a lot of writing about photography. So
Which we enjoy in your newsletters.
Right, and thank you. And I'll be making a trip out to the Southwest in October.
Great,
So
great.
That's what I'm up to.
Well, there's a new car gallery opened up in Carmel on Lincoln at Ocean, the Manny Espinosa Gallery, and it specializes in wine and vineyard photography, and I have some pieces up on the wall there. So spin by between wine tasting rooms next time you're in town. I'm also exhibiting this summer at the Sea Harvest restaurant at the Crossroads in Carmel, along with image makers Jackie Turner and David Gubernick. Remember to get and post all your Monterey County photo event info at Monterey Peninsula Photo Events. That's mpenphotoevents.blogspot.com. That's our program. Thank you, Huntington Witherall, Bert Eilenfeld, and Ray Uji.
Hey.
And thanks to Roman Laurence for sharing his artistry with us, and Roger Aguirre-Smith and the Center for Photographic Art for helping us to capture it. Bill Speck for his music, and Michael Martins directing the show from the control room. And of course, a big thank you to our sponsor, the Arts Council for Monterey County. Tune in September 20th when we take our studio from Monterey to the gallery at the Center for Photographic Art in Carmel to shoot our next regular episode, number 16, about portrait photography with guests Brandolyn Rexon, Michelle Magdalena Maddox, with a recorded interview with Randy Tennell. You can view past episodes of West Coast Focus at your convenience at stevesmac.com, West Coast Focus TV, and as always, you have my word you'll see at least 100 photos. We showed about 130 today.
May you bring order to chaos, and everyone else sees that face in the rock too. Thanks for focusing on the West Coast. Now get off the couch and let that shutter fly.